Hello and welcome to another AfterMaths episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths, with me, John Cripwell, and today, joined by a returning very special guest, I'm really pleased to say that I've got Ash Morris back with me again. Hi, Ash.
Hello, thanks for having me back. I believe I am your biggest fan, so this is a pinch me moment.
I think, it may be you, actually. I think you might be responsible for quite a lot of the downloads on this podcast. So, yeah, I appreciate it. And that's why you're back again. If anybody else feels like they listen to a lot of episodes and wants to come on the show, you are more than welcome. Just send us your download stats and we'll get you on. So I'm joined by Ash, who has stepped in at the last moment, because not all heroes wear capes, because Becky has abandoned me. If you listen to last week's AfterMaths episode, you will know that she is away in America, and for some reason didn't want to interrupt her holiday to join me on this episode, which is not the kind of dedication that we'd normally expect, is it, Ashley?
No, I'm actually very shocked. I'm shocked to hear this.
It's disappointing.
She'll probably be streaming it, though, from America and listening, giving you a support that way, I'm sure.
I'm sure she will. We'll do a quick test next week when she's back. Yeah, and see what she's missed out on. So this is the Primary Maths Podcast. We have 2 episodes per week during term time. So on a Tuesday, there's an interview episode, and this week I was very pleased to be joined by a couple of your former colleagues, actually, Ash. Kate Henshaw.
I've listened to it, John.
Did you? Excellent.
Yeah.
So Kate Henshaw and Kat Martin, and the focus of the conversation was really about how we can deepen understanding and make sure that we're designing lessons where every child is challenged to think a bit more deeply about the mathematical concepts that we're learning about. So if you've missed that episode, go back and have a listen to it. And then on a Friday, which is today, we put out an AfterMaths episode, which is normally myself and Becky. Today, again, really grateful to be joined by Ash, which is a little bit more of a light-hearted conversation around what might be happening in the world of education at the moment. So today, the thing that I really wanted to talk about is this new report that came out this week, which is all about setting and ability grouping, which you might have heard about. So I'll talk about that in a little while. But first, the reason you're here, Ash, is it is National Space Day. Happy National Space Day.
Happy National Space Day. I was worried then that you were going to involve me in some really specialist conversation about setting, so I do thank you.
Well, you are a former secondary teacher, and we know that setting is and streaming perhaps is kind of a standard practice in secondary schools, and actually this report that came out this week was based on secondary education, although Key Stage 3. So I'm sure you would have some insights to share on it, but we're going to park that for one moment so that we don't end up having a fight on the podcast. And we'll preserve our relationship and talk about space instead. Because a couple of weeks ago, Becky and I did do a little bit of a maths of space, because it was the height of the Artemis 2 mission, and I was completely locked in on that, Ash. I watched the launch. I followed it every day. I just think it's really exciting. And obviously, I'm not anywhere near old enough to have been around for the original Apollo missions and things. So I just think it's fascinating that we're going back to the moon potentially. And yeah, lots of exciting stuff seems to be happening in that space at the moment, if you pardon the pun.
Speaking of old enough, again, this is not in relevance to your age, John, but a big conversation about Artemis was the average age of the astronauts on that crew were not what we class early career. And it's been really, we talk about being inclusive and diverse. And actually, this is an area that we don't speak about much, people that are later in the career being represented. And I think that's opened a lot of eyes and inspired a lot of people.
Yeah, it's fascinating because they were their average age, I think, is actually older than my age.
I think they range from 47 to 50.
Yeah, so definitely
then.
Definitely. So yeah, so we tend to think of astronauts being these explorers that are probably a bit younger, and I'm
Fearless.
sure these were very fit people and very, but talented. But they also need some, some experience. I think most, certainly two of them were former test pilots and things, which kind of
Wow.
makes sense, doesn't it? If you're
Some great
testing out this new
credentials.
vehicle.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have you done much test piloting in your career?
Just dabbled here and there.
Just
But I'm
when
too
called
young, far
upon.
too young, as you see, to
Yeah. Yeah.
be
Your
delving into that.
space journeys are reserved for a few years down the line. Yeah.
Yeah,
You could be one of the scientists that goes up to the International Space Station, though.
I'd take great joy in it. However,
Would you? Would you
oh,
would you genuinely like to do that?
yeah, I really, really would. But sadly, I mean, I don't want to go on about the secondary curriculum, but throughout my schooling, space wasn't really that in the curriculum, and my knowledge of space is very minimal, other than, the order of the planets from the sun and orbiting and rotating and seasons. That's about as far as it goes. So, space exploration has always felt very out my reach and very something that makes me be like, wow.
You see, this is why they'd come to me instead, because they would realise that I taught science at Key Stage 2, and when we did space as a topic for many years, so they'd be like, yeah, we'll skip over the secondary science teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, did you come across Project Hail Mary at all?
No?
So that was a film that was massive this year, starring Ryan Gosling, I think. And before that, it was a book written by an author whose name escapes me. I'm really sorry, but he also wrote
He's listening to
The
this now. He's
Martian.
really annoyed.
I know, yeah, he will be. He will be. I apologise. I'll put it in the show notes, and a link to your book as well. But he wrote The Martian as well, which was also turned into a film. And
Yeah.
he likes to write these quite science accurate sci-fi stories. But the protagonist of Hail Mary, without giving too much away, was a former scientist who became a school teacher, teaching science at secondary, and then ended up on this mission to save the world, journeying into space.
So flip that on its head. I could become the scientist.
Exactly. That was my thinking. Yeah, that was
Inspired,
my
John.
thinking. Yeah, absolutely. So it is National Space Day today.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this on Friday, the 1st of May, when we release it. And I believe, Ash, you've got a couple of science-based facts for me. Is that right? Space-based facts, I should say.
Yeah, I have got a couple of space facts for you. Tried to not use the ones that were used on me yesterday, that were quite cruelly used on me as a true or false, and I got them all wrong.
Who did that to you? Was that your
Sarah
STEM
Hudson.
Conversations co-host? So for anybody who is unaware, and I can't imagine anybody out there would be, but just in case, Ash, Ash is the co-host of the STEM Conversations podcast, another Twinkle podcast, which is very much science, but also technology, engineering, and a little bit of maths. I think we
Yeah, we
cover it
try
that
to avoid
bit.
the maths because we get that from you. You do such a
Exactly.
great job. We don't want to tread
We're
on
all
your
part of
toes.
the same family. It's fine.
Yeah.
But quite science focused, really, alongside your co-host Sarah,
Mhm.
who put these questions to you yesterday? Not these questions, a separate set of questions.
She gets so much joy from making me
She really
cross.
does. She really does as well. If
If
you
I ask
haven't,
her a joke, she gets such joy from getting the punchline straight away and winding me up.
and you can see it in her eyes. If you watch the YouTube videos, she's just, I've never seen her happier.
No.
So, okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing that then.
Yeah. So my facts to you are not a true or false. I'm going to really fairly tell you these facts and hope that they blow your mind. As
Okay.
actually they did mine. They did mine. These were new to me too.
Well, we'll
First fact.
see. Given my long experience of teaching about space, we'll see whether these are new facts or not.
Let's pretend.
Okay, yeah, I'll
We're
put my
live.
A-level theatre studies qualifications to good use here. Okay.
Okay, first fact, and we've already touched on Apollo. The Apollo astronauts brought back £842 worth of moon rock with them. And when this moon rock was studied, it was found that its structure and its makeup was very similar to Earth, to the point where it's believed that the moon... No, John, you don't already know this. The moon is part of Earth or Earth's child. And that's my first fact that you look like you already know.
That is amazing and definitely brand new information to me. Hadn't
Brilliant.
come across that before. Definitely come across that before.
Right, this fact's better.
That's an amazing amount for saying how precious space travelers are generally about the cargo weight and things,
Yeah.
to the point where they left that there are my daughters are very fond of this particular fact. There are bags of human excrement and vomit left on the surface of the moon because they wanted to save weight. So they chucked out all sorts of debris
Yeah.
onto the moon's surface to save weight, getting the lander back up to the craft. So to bring home, say 860 odd pounds.
842 pounds.
So that's over a metric ton
I was
of.
about to ask you what that was in stones.
I don't know in stones, but obviously it was 2.2 pounds, I think,
A
to a
kilogram.
kilogram. Oh no, other way round, isn't it?
No, 2.2 pounds to a
Yeah,
kilogram.
2.2 pounds to a kilogram. Yeah. So over 1,600 kilograms. That's a lot of moon rock.
Would we consider this a fair trade then? Human feces for a bit of moon rock.
I mean,
That's
and
the
the
cool
thing is,
fact.
because there's no atmosphere there and nothing to degrade it, it is just sat there for the next visitor to come along and find, which is
Those poor
a
people.
charming thought, I think. I apologise to anybody eating their dinner at the moment listening to this. Come on then,
Are you ready for the
fact
next
number
fact?
2 then. Come on then.
Okay, I like this one. It's a little bit dark. Wait, pun intended or not. So, the sun's light takes 8 minutes to travel to Earth. So if the sun was to, don't nod like you know this. If the sun was to disappear miraculously, which would be tragic, we would still have light for 8 minutes. And the Earth would essentially ghost orbit a non-existent sun for 8 minutes until it, not that it's got a, mind and it realizes the sun's not there. And then it would travel in a straight line in utter darkness forever because it's no longer orbiting the sun. However, we would probably live for a week traveling
Really?
in the dark. Yeah, because the Earth's atmosphere traps in so much heat that we can live for around a week. Plants and such would begin to die, meaning there's a lack of oxygen. But if my fact checking is right, and AI did ask me if I was shocked that it wasn't the lack of oxygen that was going to kill us, it was the lack of heat that was going to eventually kill us. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
massive ice age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did know
It's
about the 8
predicted,
minutes.
though. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I did know about the 8 minutes. So that was one thing that we taught at Key Stage 2.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it's not part of the curriculum necessarily, but when you're trying to engage children in,
Mhm.
learning about light and how, and trying to give a sense of the distances involved between these bodies in our solar system. It's just,
Yeah.
the sun, it seems like it's as close as the moon is when you look at it in the sky, but it's so far away. It's ridiculous. And then when you go outside on a nice day like today, so it's beautiful outside today, you go outside and you can actually feel the sun's warmth on your skin, and you think that's
Yeah.
traveled millions of miles.
Yeah.
Those particles from this enormous nuclear reactor hanging around in space, all the way through that vastness of space and the vacuum of space and the coldness of space, all the way to just warm me up a little bit on Earth.
Or
That
a
sort
lot
of thing
today.
blows my mind.
I failed a question on a quiz yesterday. Did you ever do those quizzes that pop up on TikTok?
Yes, I do occasionally.
I love it. I search for them. And it said, which direction does the sun rise? And you have a second to answer. So I was like,
Okay.
up.
Rises in the west, sets in the east, or is it the other way around?
Other way around.
Other way around. Rises in the east,
Yeah.
sets in the west. Yeah.
So if you were
That's why you want the
lost, you could look
west-facing
for the
garden, isn't it?
sunrise, and you know that's the east, so you know where the west is. But if you want north or
Yeah.
south, I can't help you.
Never eat shredded wheat. That's all you need to remember. Or naughty elephants squirt water if you need your compass points. But no, that is fascinating. And the other thing, I read this in a book. An author was talking about how mind-boggling it is to think that those light particles, those photons, have travelled from the sun to Earth. And when you look at your shadow on the ground, they've travelled all that amazing distance, and the one thing stopping them hitting the ground is you.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You've managed to get in the way of those particles that have travelled that incredible distance. And obviously, they're not just focused on Earth, are they? Either they're travelling in every direction from the sun. I find it
every
quite hard to,
direction, yeah.
yeah, find it quite hard to get my head
Interesting.
around
Wear
that
sun
sort of stuff.
cream, everybody. That's quite a scary reality, isn't it? That we're
It is.
stopping the sun. Makes me think more about protecting
Yeah,
us.
yeah. So, if people wanted to find out a little bit more about National Space Day, if you wanted to do a last minute thing with your class, if you're listening to this on the way into work, to teach in school this morning, perhaps, or even next week, maybe you want to say it was National Space Day on Friday,
Mhm.
where can people go to find out a little bit more?
So interestingly, I know you have mentioned the podcast that I co-host, but it's not there. It's going to be on the Twinkle Education Publishing YouTube. There'll be a 20-minute video of myself and the primary science lead chatting about ways that we would spark interest about National Space Day, and her pitching a quiz to me, of which I lose every question, apart from the one about Artemis.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Mhm.
Do you know, I asked this to Becky last week. I'll leave you with this one since you enjoy
Losing.
questions. Yeah, yeah, being put on the spot. Do you know why Artemis was called Artemis?
No, but I do know that Artemis is the goddess of hunting, is she not?
She is, but she is the twin sister of Apollo.
Apollo.
Yeah,
Wow! I had a cat
yeah,
called Apollo.
yeah, and that's why. Did you? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
After the gladiator. Yeah.
No, after the
Oh.
the god.
Um, that's why in lots of films, space missions are called Artemis. So because
Wow.
they wanted to make it sound like Apollo, but obviously didn't want to use Apollo. So loads and loads of films through history have used Artemis as the names of spacecraft and space missions and that sort of thing.
I
So
think
yeah,
your fact there, simple fact that you just pulled from the top of your head, was cooler than my too.
I don't know about that, but I enjoyed
Mm,
yours.
thank
But
you.
yeah, I did like that one. I thought it was a fun
Yeah,
little fact. So thank you so much for coming in and yeah, just hijacking the podcast for a couple of minutes.
that's what
What
it
have
is.
you got coming up on STEM Conversations? If people want to check that out,
So our next episode is with Danielle Brown, MBE, might I add, who is a former Paralympic gold medalist twice for archery. And she
amazing.
talks about her journey being a Paralympian and how the criteria actually changed, and she was no longer considered or like deemed appropriate to be a Paralympian anymore, and had to navigate a career change as someone who had been so highly respected in that field, and was sort of well known and had adapted to being in this Olympic life that she loved so much. And she went on to author children's books. The most notable one is Run Like a Girl, where she highlights lots and lots of athletes that are women and their experiences and their wins. So yeah, we chat to her about womanhood, which of course I love to talk about, but she brings lots of other angles there, being part of underrepresented groups that I am not, and she was able to highlight a lot of things. So yeah, that's the next episode from us.
Amazing. And people can check that out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts ordinarily.
Absolutely. Just search STEM conversations and we should be the top, I hope. Feel
You can
free
go
to
and see
look.
Sarah grilling Ash on questions, not just about space, about all sorts of things. It's one of my favourite bits of your podcast is just seeing the sheer delight when Sarah catches you out on something.
She's
So
cool.
yeah, it's worth going and having a look. Thanks, Ash.
Thanks,
We will
John.
see you again, no doubt.
Bye. Thanks to John's listeners. Bye-bye.
So we are going to continue on just for a little bit longer because there's been some research that has landed this week, which I think is capturing imaginations and certainly being talked about all over the internet at the moment. And that is a new study that has come out in conjunction or in combination between the Education Endowment Foundation, the EEF, and the University College London. And it's all about mixed attainment groupings or settings. So this study was based on secondary classrooms. It looked at year 7 and 8 maths lessons, particularly in secondary schools. They spent 2 years looking at lessons over 97 different schools, comparing schools using mixed attainment grouping with schools using setting by prior attainment. So essentially, children being put into top set, middle set, bottom set, etc. Now, reading this report, I had to really try and set aside my own biases, and I will be upfront with you about this at this point, because as somebody who has worked in maths education for 20 odd years, I have very much developed my own thoughts and feelings about this approach over that time. And as somebody who didn't feel like a mathematician when he was at school, and frankly struggled with maths in secondary school particularly, that has also sort of coloured my thoughts about setting and streaming and mixed attainment. However, what I wanted to do today was just talk about what the findings were in this report, and perhaps give it some colour for primary settings, so that we can think about what the implications might be in primary schools. So, as I say, it looked at year 7 and 8 lessons, so key stage 3, and it found that overall, pupils in mixed attainment classes made around 1 month less progress, and they gave that a low to moderate security rating. So they weren't completely convinced of that, but low to moderate security rating, that there was some evidence that it was around 1 month less progress. Now, that was different between pupils who had a lower prior attainment and pupils who had a higher prior attainment. And what it found was that in mixed attainment classes, pupils who had a higher prior attainment, those children who'd done well previously in maths lessons, made around 2 months less progress over the same time period as the same prior higher attainers who'd been put into a top set class. So all those prior higher attainers working together, they made more progress than if those prior higher attainers put into a mixed attainment class. Interestingly, lower prior attainers and pupils eligible for free school meals or similarly disadvantaged, they made similar progress irrespective of which class they were in. So that 1 month average was really came to be because of the 2 months that higher prior attainers lost compared to the similar progress that prior lower attainers made. Now, there was a few things that came out of this when I read the report and looked at it in detail. I think my feelings that I can sum up at this point, realistically and frankly, are that I don't think that this report indicates that mixed attainment teaching cannot work. I don't think that's what this shows. What it does seem to show is that in these secondary maths classrooms, mixed attainment teaching often did not maintain enough challenge for higher attainers. And I think that bit is clear. So my kind of takeaway is that how we group pupils differently doesn't automatically make the teaching better. What it does is it changes the problem that teachers have to solve. The kind of line that stood out to me from the report was that where they observed lessons in mixed attainment classrooms, those lessons tended to be very procedural. There wasn't a particular focus on conceptual understanding, which is something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast, and the importance of conceptual understanding. There wasn't a huge amount of evidence of using a variety of representations and things. Another key bit was that the study's observations suggested that mixed attainment lessons often reduced demand for higher attainers. The reason for that was that it seemed that the pitch of those lessons was pitched more towards the prior lower attainers' current ability. And that where there were challenges provided for the prior higher attainers, those challenges were often completely disconnected from the current learning. So the challenges hadn't been written bespokely for those pupils in that lesson. they were sort of a go and help yourself to an additional challenge because you've finished the work type of scenario. For me, that is a huge red flag. When we are considering mixed attainment lessons, the pitch is really, really important. Yes, we want it to be accessible in the first instance for as many of the children in that class as possible. We know that there are various reasons for that. We want to encourage children to feel safe. We want to make sure that as many pupils as possible are cognitively engaged in the learning, and therefore they need to be able to access it in order to do that. But at the same time, as the teacher, I know my pupils. I need to have an idea of what I'm going to do to keep the prior higher attainers, or I'm not even sure it's helpful to think of them in that way, the children who grasp the concept quickly. What am I going to do in that lesson to ensure that they remain cognitively engaged in the learning as well? And that's why throughout the lesson, I would plan deeper questions appropriate to that part of the lesson that I can give to any pupils who want to attempt them, but that really demand a bit of deeper thinking, a bit of deeper understanding. And we talked about this with Kate and Kat on this week's interview episode, actually. So it's worth going back and having a listen to that if you would like to. But we know that there are many decades of research, actually, that show that mixed attainment teaching can work. And I particularly think for primary schools, it would still be my preferred methodology. The reason I say for primary schools is because I know that at Key Stage 4, so years 10 and 11, because of the different tiers of exam papers that children might have to sit at GCSE, it kind of makes sense that some children or some students at that stage might have to learn different content to other students at that stage, depending on which tier of paper you are going for. But for me, at Key Stage 3, if children were arriving at Key Stage 3 with a broadly similar experience and diet of good quality teaching at primary school, where those gaps haven't had chance to open up too much, then we would find, I think, that mixed ability teaching in Key Stage 3 could be much more effective. One of the other interesting things about the study was that it found that where setting was implemented, those prior higher attainers were put in a top set, and they tended to be given a specialist maths teacher to teach them. In some ways, I think that kind of makes sense. It's possibly they're looking at the more demanding, more challenging maths. But if you look at it from another point of view, the children in the lower set actually have got the most progress to make. We want those children to catch up with the others, don't we? We want them to leave secondary school with a solid qualification in maths, but more than that, feeling that maths is for them and that maths matters and that they are mathematicians. And so reserving the specialist teacher for the top set, well, that kind of explains why the top set were making more progress at that point. They had a specialist teacher who was able to work with them, whereas the bottom set didn't always have that specialist teacher. And so I thought that was another interesting thing to come out of this. So again, trying not, I realise I'm slightly on my soapbox at points here, but trying to be fair to the study, I think what we can really take away from this is that it doesn't really matter as much from a attainment point of view which way you go with setting, streaming, mixed attainment, if the quality of the teaching and the lesson design and the pitch isn't right in the first place. We've got to get those things right, and then we could look again at the attainment. The thing that I will argue for, though, is the effect that ability grouping, particularly in primary school, can have on pupils' confidence and their self-awareness, their thinking of themselves as a mathematician. I would, back in the day when I first started teaching, we would have red table, blue table, green table, children were very aware that if they happen to be on red table, they might be not doing the same work as the children on green table. There was an inbuilt inequality there. They were not getting the same offering. They were not getting the same opportunities. And the gaps never, ever closed between those children who were on red table and those children who were on green table. And again, that's perhaps not surprising given that they didn't have the opportunity to close those gaps. They went along at the same sort of pace, maintaining that gap all the time. So I think the work that has gone on in primary schools to try and improve the pedagogical knowledge and subject knowledge of teachers goes hand in hand with a teaching for mastery approach, and that goes hand in hand with a mixed attainment setting, or mixed attainment classroom, I should say, not to confuse matters even further, and even mixed ability pairings. I've talked about this in the past. I'm a proponent personally of mixed ability pairings, but making sure that those mixed ability pairings don't have too much of a gap between them. You don't want somebody who is a very high prior attainer working with somebody who is a very low prior attainer, because that gap is just too great. So thinking about your classroom table settings carefully can have a huge impact. But let me know your thoughts on this. I'll be really interested to hear from primary and secondary colleagues, really. If you've read the report, what did you make of it? Will you change your practice according to it? And what have you found that works for you in your schools? I am trying to keep an open mind on this, but I would love to hear some of your thoughts. I will be back on Tuesday with another interview episode. But in the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic week in school. Please do drop us a like, subscribe to our channel. You can find us on YouTube as well as Apple and Spotify and anywhere else that you get your podcasts. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a quick review, even if that's just a quick star rating, I would hugely appreciate that as well. In the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you again on Tuesday. See you then. Take care.